podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn and welcome to How We're the podcast from Roker Report. And as we thought we hadn't talked about our epic first leg victory over Coventry on Friday night enough, we thought we'd talk about it some more. But this time we'll also focus on what lies ahead for the lads in all that all-important second leg on Tuesday night. And I have a couple of people to help me go through it all and calm my nerves while we're at it, hopefully. The first man who I talked to just before the first leg, so I'm looking forward to hearing his thoughts on how it all planned out. It's Martin Wunderlich. Hello, Martin.
Hello, Chris. Yeah, it wasn't as bad as we thought it might have been on Friday, was it? It was a pretty good night all told. So yes, let's hope for more of the same on Tuesday.
Well, that's it. If you can get your crystal ball back out today, that'd be much appreciated for this second leg, but it'll be good to get into it. And also to join me, we're very pleased to have Scott Wilson from the Northern Echo. Hello, Scott.
Hi, fellas. You all right?
Yeah, good. Nervous, but feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, were you actually there on Friday, or did you watch?
I was,
from your living room?
I was there on Friday. I mean, couldn't have gone much better, could it? To be perfectly honest. I'm sure we'll get into it, but bit of a Regis masterclass. Tactics spot on, players executed it perfectly, and then a night that was already pretty good. The Mayenda obviously winners, the kind of icing on the cake, isn't it? But as I think all Sunderland fans are eager to point out, and as Regis Lebris was certainly eager to point afterwards, it is only halfway there. There's almost certainly going to be some more twists and turns on Tuesday. So I don't think anyone's getting ahead of themselves just yet, are they?
Yeah. Well, you see, we'll get into this. We'll get into this kind of perfect away performance and great performance again. I think we're going to get into that conversation. I'm going to kind of start with you, Scott, because I read your reaction piece that discussed the manager going with Ballard at the back in place of Mepham. I think Mepham had only. I think I was reading what you put in that. Was it 4 out of the last 41 or something he hadn't played in?
Correct. And one of them he was suspended for.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. And he also went for Mayenda and Isidor up top, which he's tried a couple of times. Now you're saying he got that spot on. I mean, did that seem, because and again I read Lebris's comments in it, and he said we used the 4-4-2 formation during the season. He said not often, but it was always in my mind that we could do this. It's always connected with the scenario of the opponent, and in the end it was a good decision. So did you see this all as a result of being able to plan ahead? Or do you think he ended up taking a few risks as a result of what happened in the run-in, like those performances and results?
No, I don't think it was related to the run-in. I think, for all that we've been writing about it, fans have been talking about it, I know it feels a bit of a blasé thing. I genuinely think Regis Lebris just could not really have cared less about results, performance levels. He cared about what he was seeing in training in the last month. He cared about the conversations he was having with his players in the last month. He cared about who they were going to end up playing and what that meant for how he wanted to set Sunderland up. But I genuinely think that in terms of what was happening in the 90-minute matches in the last 5 or 6, he literally could not care less. So I think it was a blank sheet of paper once we got to Coventry. And I think that the bulk of what he decided to do was how to stop Coventry in an away leg. Now, interestingly, I'd been at Coventry the week before on the last day of the season covering Borough, and the difference between how Borough set up. Now, admittedly, Borough needed to get a result out of that game. They needed to win that game. But the level of detail and the kind of level of planning and the extent to which the players had clearly bought into and understood the plan, I thought was like night and day between Borough and Sunderland. And that's why I do genuinely think Lebris needs a real pat on the back, because it was a bold move. I don't think I was expecting it. I'm quite sure, even when we saw the team sheet, the thought was probably, okay, so that's probably Mayenda on the left. I guess it could be Isidor on the left, but it'll be one of them on the left. Lefebvre probably is the 10. No, 4-4-2, 2 up top. And what it did was it just, the 2 banks of 4, whereas when I'd seen Coventry against Borough were wide open. Hadji Wright, Sakamoto, cutting in field, big gaps between the midfield and the defence, loads of areas for them to play in and create chances. That just wasn't there on Friday night. For all that Coventry had the ball, they had absolutely nowhere to go with it in the final third. It was so compact. It was so well drilled. It was so well organised. And I think prior to the game, I think if you'd said to Labrace, you're gonna play like that and you're gonna get away with a 0-0, I think he probably would have took that. The fact that then in the second half, Sunderland were able to cause the threats that they caused on the break, get the 2 goals, and actually win the game, I think it's probably a bit of a bonus.
Well, speaking of trying to get into the manager's head, me and Martin were trying to do exactly that in the podcast leading up to the first leg. And Martin, you were trying to second guess that back four, and you were maybe saying Ballard was maybe the right kind of choice, but you were talking about maybe O'Nien at full back and things like that, and maybe not dropping Mepham. And you when we spoke in that game as well, you talked that you were concerned that we'd sit in and invite that early pressure, and then we did just that. And you also said how important those early stages are, and we go back to those first 5 minutes, 4 or 5 corners in succession, and Patterson had that huge early flap, and that was only about 3 or 4 minutes into the game. And if that ball bounces differently in the first few minutes, it's a completely different game. So is there an element of when you do that, you leave it a bit too much to luck, or you just need that bit of luck to get through moments like that?
You certainly need a bit of luck, don't you? And I think, had things been differently in that first 5 minutes, we could easily have been a goal down. Coventry came out as we expected them to. And my concern actually kind of played out to some extent in terms of, yes, we'd sit back, but I was more concerned with what we did when we were able to get the ball. So our ball retention hadn't been great in the past couple of months. And I think on Friday, when we did get the ball to get out, we ended up giving it straight back to them and then inviting another wave of attack. And we didn't yes, we defended really well and really solidly, but we didn't look after the ball enough. And I think that's how we can kind of take pressure off as well. But look, I think, you and I think we called it pretty right in terms of what might happen. And I think really that first 10 or 15 minutes, you maybe throw a dice, and 2 times out of 6 you concede a goal, 3 times out of 6 you get away with it, and 1 time out of 6 something else happens. So we had that one where I think O'Nien kind of tried to clear it, came back, booted it off the line, didn't you? That was after the flap by Patterson, and then had a couple of corners and stuff like that. But the most important thing was weathering that storm. And look, that storm was going to come in with whatever we did. They were going to start off with a whole load of pressure, the crowd behind them, and how we stood up to that. And, it was as much a mental thing and a physical thing as it was a tactical thing. You can set up whichever way you want, you can have whatever game plan you want, but if the players aren't absolutely on it, mentally and physically from the start, you'll get run over anyway. And that was the most pleasing aspect of it for me, that I thought we looked so mentally attuned to what we needed to do in that game. And as Scott said, Regis Labrace probably wasn't that bothered with the last few games. The concern I had with the last few games was that we kind of didn't look mentally with it. We didn't look sharp. But I thought, all of those concerns were dispelled after the first, 5-10 minutes at Coventry, in terms of that mental sharpness. So look, yeah, I think another night it could have done differently, couldn't it? Another night that ball could have dropped to somebody else's feet and it's 1-0 after 5 minutes, and it's a whole different game. But after we'd weathered that, it's again, like you and I said, that first 20 minutes, if we could weather that, then it's a whole different game. Because that's the biggest advantage that they would have in the 2 legs. So thankfully we did, and we managed to deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, and Scott, you were there with that atmosphere, first 5 minutes. I mean, you could see the Coventry fans, and it was a little bit like, I watched the first leg, Bristol City, Sheffield United, and it was almost like the atmosphere was carrying Bristol City through for their first half hour or whenever, well, just before half time when the red card came. Basically, that's what silenced them. But I imagine being then inside that kind of atmosphere, you can imagine from the players' point of view when those balls are coming to the box, first 5 minutes, 4 or 5 corners off the bounce, that you can imagine actually the conversations beforehand being all about riding that out. But again, what's your thoughts in terms of saying, well, we almost invite that on and we just have to try and ride it out and at times rely on that bit of luck, the ball to bounce the right way.
And it was a good atmosphere. There's no doubt about that. They got into it. They were up for it. There's absolutely no doubt. But I think Coventry did create a bit of early pressure, and you're right. There was the kind of flurry of early corners. I think what was important was what they didn't do was at any stage though kind of slice Sunderland open and really run at Sunderland and get past people, get in behind people. The game never got stretched. So while there was a lot of kind of early ball for Coventry, and in that first 10 minutes, most of the game was played in Sunderland's defensive third. It was played in a defensive third where Sunderland always had 8 players, often had 9 or 10 players. They were packing it out. So, like I say, while Coventry, it's not like Patterson had to make 5 saves in the first 10 minutes because Coventry were slinging great balls in, and you were thinking, God, how was Sunderland set up here? They're getting in behind them, they're getting round them. While Coventry had a lot of the ball, you were kind of thinking, well, okay, what are they actually going to do with it? And I thought surprisingly quickly it became obvious that actually I'm not really sure Coventry know exactly what they're going to do with it, because they've got all this ball, but Sunderland is sitting so deep they're not going to get in behind them. They're compact, so Wright and Sakamoto are not going to get in from the flanks. I think Sunderland would have been more than happy for Wright and Sakamoto to be slinging crosses in all night towards Thomas Asante, because they would have backed Ballard and O'Nien to deal with that. And again, that's kind of the way it played out. Now, what's interesting now is I think while we're obviously going to talk about how Sunderland are going to approach Tuesday night, Coventry are going to have a long, hard think about what they're going to do as well, because just doing the same thing for the 90 minutes almost certainly will not work for Coventry. So are they going to put Sims in and go a bit more direct? Are they going to change their wide players and maybe go more 4-4-2 to match up how Sunderland play? I don't know. I think, clearly Sunderland will have a game plan and we'll get into that, but Coventry are going to have to come up with one too, because on the evidence of Friday night, them doing the same things for 90 minutes shouldn't work.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely get more into the second leg, but from my point of view, I haven't enjoyed the first leg quite enough yet, so I'm gonna bask in that for a little bit longer. But I mean, Martin, in terms of, I mean, look, again, it's on the socials, but there's been we've been talking, and look, I'm one of them. I'm going to put my hands up exactly the same as you two. You've both been seeing a great away performance, and I love those 2 banks of 4 and setting up like that. I think I love that sort of thing, but been a few comments on the socials that it wasn't a great performance. I'm pretty sure there was, I mentioned on the last pod, there was one from Julio Arca, I think, talking about, and that argument that we could have defended better by simply keeping the ball better, and thinking about some of the players we've got, and then you risk those balls coming into the box, because is there then an argument to say, well, Ballard got man of the match, brilliant, but maybe was it because we allowed all those balls to come into the box that he had to do that? But, I mean, what's your thoughts on it? Because it's being described as a perfect away performance by some, and some are saying, well, it wasn't actually a great performance because we didn't keep hold of the football, and we could have actually reduced that risk by not allowing them to come forward and put the ball in the box.
I think from a setup perspective and defensive perspective, it was perfect. I think, as I said earlier, I think when we get out, we could have kept the ball a bit more. We could have been a bit more incisive with our breaks. There was a few times where we got out and then the next pass went back to Coventry and we invited them back into us. So I think if we can talk for a perfect away performance, when we actually got the ball clear, we'd be able to...
It's not perfect now.
Well, it's perfect from a different perspective, isn't it? Perfect in terms of the result. But look, I think, again, that it's that bit where we defended so well. And you're right, like if we are then able to keep the ball a little bit and just retain possession and take a little bit of sting out of the game, that next wave of attack might not come as quickly. So you might not have as much defending to do. But look, I think you can't complain too much. I think, even if you look at the stats, our pass success rate was like, was it 68 or 71? We didn't have high success in terms of our passing. And that's kind of symptomatic of that. When we actually got out, we were often, and that can be because we didn't have enough players up the field because we'd been defending. So we didn't have as many options to pass to. But I just thought we were a little bit, maybe a little bit of sort of a little bit indecisive, I guess, in terms of where we wanted to pass the ball and where we wanted to keep it once we got it out. But look, you're kind of nitpicking there in the context of the game, aren't you? But look, put it this way, right? If Mayenda hadn't got that goal at the end and they'd got the penalty when Bellingham did the slide tackle, which, you're an inch either way into penalty to Coventry, right? And you're going away with a 2-1 defeat, you could have played exactly the same and we wouldn't be saying it was a perfect away performance. Right? So, it all comes down to moments again.
Yeah. And I mean, Scott, you mentioned that plan, obviously that plan as well. I mean, 74% possession, maybe part of the plan. And Labrie mentioned himself about not being comfortable about what was happening on our left-hand side as well. But, a lot was made before the game about the mentality of the players. And I think the biggest example, you look at that first goal, Isidor makes a challenge on the edge of the box and we get possession. And he sprints from basically 5 yards outside our box, the full length of the pitch to get the ball. I mean, let's put it this way. A few weeks ago in the Oxford game and, QPR game, he's not sprinting the full length of the pitch to get that ball, is he?
No, and I think that comes down to what, in fairness to Labrie and the players, they were saying about those games beforehand. That, as fans, as journalists, pundits, commentators, whatever, we can all trot out they're professional footballers. Sunderland fans are paying a fortune to travel to Bristol. They've got a right to demand a certain level of performance. Every player should give everything in every game. All of that's fine. You only have to look at Liverpool in the last couple of weeks. If you're a footballer playing a game that fundamentally that the result of that game doesn't really matter. I don't care who you are. I don't care what level it is. I just think the edge to your performance is not there. Clearly, the question before Friday night was, okay, but can we actually guarantee that edge will be back there when it does mean something? Well, whatever else happens on Tuesday night, however else this plays out, don't think you can now say that them not having that edge in the run-up affected what they're going to be doing in the playoffs, because they were bang on it on Friday night, and whatever happens on Tuesday, if Sunderland don't get through on Tuesday, it won't be because the players aren't up for it or aren't aware of the importance of the game or anything like that, will it? I think we can pretty much put that one to bed.
Yeah. And actually, just in terms of planning, Martin, I thought it was quite nice to see some planned set pieces that they've clearly been keeping up their sleeve for a good few weeks.
It was quite unusual, wasn't it? You kind of entered a parallel universe where Sunderland are good at free kicks and corners. No, it was interesting. We tried to get Hume on the end of them on the occasions that we tried, didn't we? But no, look, they've obviously been working on those things from a tactical point of view and a set piece point of view. And as we've kind of said all along, particularly in relation to Enzo Lefebvre, him coming into the side for the playoffs, he's a difference maker. And those little, we saw with the pass, and also we saw with him closing down the fullback for Mayenda's goal. Him doing that on 90 plus, whatever it was, minutes. His fitness is obviously right back up. He's ramped it back up from his injury, hasn't he? And I think it's those little moments that can change the game, and the set pieces obviously working on them because that can be completely decisive. The interesting thing I thought was, we've talked about whether it was the right approach over the past few weeks to rest players and manage minutes and all that sort of stuff. The longer the game went on, there was one team getting stronger and stronger, and you would have thought that would be Coventry, given that we were legging it all over the place defending. But we were the ones who looked fitter and fitter as the game wore on. I thought Coventry started tiring, and mentally they didn't know what to do when they had the ball, really, because we kind of stopped every avenue that they were trying to go down. But I thought they looked a little bit leggy in the last sort of 15 minutes as well, which again I think probably gives credence to the approach that we've taken.
Yeah. And one person who didn't look leggy towards the end was Mayenda, because it was 2 minutes after we made a defensive substitution. Mepham came on for Roberts, and you think, right, well, that's it. We're shutting up shop. And then a crazy back pass allows Mayenda to go onto it. But Scott, I mean, we talk about Mayenda. He went on loan last season. The loan move really didn't work out that well for him, and you wondered where his place was going to be when he came back. And then to come on like he has this season, and then in a pressure situation like that, to read the ball, because he was on his bike before the ball was played. He kind of read it. He knew where this was going to go. And then when he went onto it, it's almost one of them for a striker where you've got too much time and you can think about it. But the way he took it past the keeper, I mean, you'd think it was a striker, who'd been knocking 25 goals in for a few years now.
And that's the most impressive thing, I think, because that's the side of his game that there probably has still been questions about this season, wasn't there? We know he's got the raw ability. We know he can score the goal that he scores at Bristol City. We know he can have the kind of run that he had in the first half, which you wondered if it was going to be Bristol City over again, and he kind of stumbles his way through a couple of challenges on the edge of the box, still manages to get a shot away. We know he's got that in him. He's fast, he's aggressive, he's direct. He will score goals like that. The question's been, like you say, if he's one-on-one with a keeper in a high-pressure situation, will he panic and just kick it straight at him, or will he do what he did, which was calmly go around and slot it away? And I think that's a really big feather in his cap, because, that is the side of his game that's needed honing. And if he is going to be Sunderland's kind of, lead striker for X amount of time, whatever league they're playing in, then they're the type of goals he's going to need to score, as well as the dynamic dribbles and the on the shoulder of the last defender and the kind of causing chaos, which we know he can do. Massive kudos. And the same for Isidor as well, I think. We were all talking in the run up to the game, weren't we? 12, was it 13? I think he got to 13, hadn't it? But anyway, the number of games that he'd had without a goal, and God, he needs a goal, and is he short of confidence? Is he whatever? Well, again, when the big moment came, he delivered. So fair play to the two of them. Yeah, I mean, again, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because how many summers have we been saying Sunderland still haven't signed a striker? They haven't got a striker. What on earth are they doing? Last summer, again, what on earth? They're going into the season without it, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's an argument that they're ending this season with two of the top 5 strikers in the Championship, one of whom is not even 20, or he's just turned 20, but not 21 yet. So, it's funny how things work out, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, you've already mentioned it, Martin, but I want to talk about it again, because I like a tackle as much as a goal, and this one was probably worth more than a goal in some senses. So we'll see how everything pans out. But that Bellingham tackle in the 90th minute, 6-yard box. If he doesn't get that right, if he doesn't time it right, it's a penalty. And he kind of went in pretty hard. He didn't, he could have easily given it away. But I mean, like I said, he was fantastic throughout the whole game, but that's as good as him scoring a goal at the end.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. And, to make that tackle as well, because I think some players would have hesitated because they would have been scared of giving the penalty away, and hoped that, somebody else would come around, or the shot would be at too narrow an angle to take advantage of it. Look, cracking one. And look, if we end up going through to Wembley and wherever, that moment of him celebrating like he's just scored a goal after he tackled him, it'll be kind of etched in folklore. That's one of those images that it'll kind of stick around for years, because he never mind liking a tackle, liking a celebration after a tackle is up there, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's it.
It was an absolute nightmare one for a journalist, because it's the 92nd minute, like you say. I've already rewritten things about 3 times. It's a great night for Sunderland. Then okay, great night, but they've given a goal away. Then, oh no, it's a great night again. Then you're watching him jump in thinking, if you give a penalty away here and they equalise, I've got to start again with bloody, So yeah. I was very, very pleased when he took the ball, put it like that.
I'm sure everyone listening's got a load of sympathy for you here, Scott.
Exactly, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, listening to the reaction and Lampard's reaction, and this might start tying in with what you were talking about with reacting to the second leg. But I mean, I was surprised at his reaction after the game, that he seemed surprised at how he'd set up. Because if you had the Coventry scouts and things, you would have went out and getting the tapes for our games against Leeds, Burnley, Sheffield United. And this was the blueprint for it. But I'm staggered that he was surprised at how we set up.
It's a funny one though, isn't it? Because tactically, we had a completely different formation of what we played in those games. We approached the game in a similar way. We kind of sit back and try to soak up the pressure and counter them. But we've kind of done that in home games as well. I mean, we've done that at home to Burnley. We've done that at home to Borough earlier on in the season. But I think that's the first time we've tried to do that with two up front. So I think that's probably where that element of surprise has come from. But Lampard looked completely flummoxed after the game. He looked as if he'd been trying to solve problems all night and just hadn't got started. I think he was not. Look, I think this is kind of symptomatic of how Coventry as a whole were approaching the game and looking at the game. They thought exactly the same Sunderland side that turned up in March would go there and turn in exactly the same performance, which was never going to happen in the month of Sunday as well. So I think there's a whole load of elements to it. But yeah, I think Lampard might have been kind of talked, to give him credit, I think he might have been talking about the 4-4-2 rather than how we kind of sat in and tried to counter.
Yeah,
he was very downbeat after the game. He was quite tetchy, actually, with some of their journalists. And obviously, again, I'd been there 6 days earlier, and he couldn't have been more cock-a-hoop after the Borough game. Like, everything in the garden was rosy. They'd gone from 17th to 5th. The momentum was with them and all this kind of stuff. And I think after the game, my feeling with it was that he was kind of accepting that probably their best chance of winning the game had gone by and they'd just got it wrong. They'd got it completely wrong. And they hadn't, like you say, really anticipated how Sunderland were going to play. Once it became apparent that was how Sunderland were going to play, they hadn't really done anything to try and change the way they were then going to attack it. It was almost kind of, well, okay, that's taken us a bit by surprise, but we better carry on doing the same things because that's what we've been working on all week. And so, now, again, he was, this isn't over. We can still go and do this, and obviously he's got to say that. But I think he knew it was a big opportunity missed for them because let's see what happens on Tuesday. But you'd like to think that was their best chance.
Yeah, and I mean, well, actually, he reminded me, when I saw him afterwards, he reminded me of how Arsene Wenger used to be after they played Sam Allardyce's Bolton. Whenever he was there, he was almost disappointed in how the opposition played.
How dare they do that?
Yeah, exactly. But Scott, actually, the one thing I wanted to talk to you about was, in terms of Regis Labrie, was his reaction to especially to the second goal on the sideline. Because he's been this kind of reserved character all season, and obviously you're there in the press conferences. You have a lot more kind of interaction with him than the likes of us. So, I mean, what do you think? Do you think that was born out of kind of relief or frustration, or because we haven't seen him like that very often?
No, we haven't. It came out a little bit there, didn't it? I think it was just kind of sheer joy at how big a goal that was and what it might mean. You know what I mean? I think it was probably up until that point, I think there was probably satisfaction at a kind of job reasonably well done, and the players had carried out what he wanted them to do. And so, I think he would have been more than satisfied. That then all of a sudden just tips the balance that bit more towards Sunderland ahead of Tuesday night, doesn't it? And I think that was it. The fact that, at an absolutely crucial stage of the game, the goal's gone in, and that like I said, clearly is gonna dent kind of Coventry's hopes. But it was somewhat unexpected to see him kind of frolicking down the touchline. We're not quite in David Pleat territory yet, are we? But we'll maybe see what happens on Tuesday night, hopefully. But no, it was quite nice to see, and we did comment on that in the press box actually, that it was the first time we'd kind of seen that, really.
Yeah, and Martin, I mean, we talked about Alex Neil and he's reaction at Hillsborough with Patrick Roberts' goal before the game. I mean, with Regis Labrie's reaction, looks like it's from someone who thought, it was almost kind of complete vindication for how the last couple of months have gone. And it's, all that planning and when it comes off like that, he just reacted to it.
Well, I think it was, and I think it's probably satisfaction in terms of individuals doing certain things. And, even at that stage of the game, if we were just so content to sit back and defend that 1-1, Enzo Lefebvre isn't putting pressure on the fullback like he was. Mayenda's not pushing up into that position as he was. And, we'd set traps that Coventry kept falling into all night. And part of me kind of wonders whether even that press was something that has been worked on and it's kind of paid off and we took advantage of it. And I don't know whether there was a little bit of that in that celebration as well. But look, it's great to see. Big goal, and it sets us up perfectly for tomorrow night, doesn't it?
Well, that's it. Lampard again talking. I read this in your piece, Scott. His comments. He said, if they come out more, there'll be a different type of threat playing between the lines, probably with 2 number 8s, which is how they often play. I'm not sure how much he's seen us with 2 number 8s, but they know they're holding the lead. So it's up to them what their strategy is, and we'll have to be adaptable on the day to try and find a way, whatever they do. They didn't do that here. They sat back and waited to counter-attack. They sucked it up, and now they've got something to hold on to. But I've got no idea how they will approach the next game. Now, I mean, is he... Because it's funny that he's just come out and said that, Scott, that he's got no idea. I mean, is that a huge sign that the British has essentially got him second-guessing and he just hasn't got a clue how we're going to...
Yeah, I think there is an element to that. I think he was clearly hurting a bit. And like I say, I think he deep down, he was probably thinking that... The Coventry hadn't got it right in the first game, so they've got to put that right in the second one. I think there's a little bit of element as well to throw it back to Sunderland to say, well, okay, you've come here and you've done a job, yeah, fine, but actually, what are you going to do now? And that is a question for Labris, and I'm sure we're recording this on Monday kind of morning. Labris is doing his presser in a few hours' time. I'm quite sure the main thrust of questioning around that will be, what's your thought process going into this? To what extent do you hold on to what you've got? To what extent do you look to put the game to bed, get on the front foot and actually settle it? And that's going to be the balance, isn't it? And that's what the second leg's going to come down to, really. Now, I think Coventry also have a balance that they've got to strike because, yes, they've got to win the game, but they don't have to win it in the first 10 minutes, do they? What they'll be desperate to avoid is what we talked about, I guess, at the flip side of what we talked about at Coventry, which is Sunderland feeding off what's going to be an absolutely superb atmosphere. I have no doubt about that, and winning the game in the first 15 minutes. I think now if you said to Frank Lampard, it's 0-0 after an hour, he'd snap your hands off because they're still in the game then, and all of a sudden Sunderland potentially are getting a little bit edgy about what's happening. So I can envisage a pretty cagey first half on Tuesday night. I think that Coventry's main priority, for all that they want to win the game, will be to stay in it early on. And we've talked about Labris. He is a pragmatic manager. I'm not saying that it will be just a rinse and repeat. I'm not sure we'll see 4-4-2. Clearly, I don't think we'll see Sunderland sitting as deep. But I think it'll be fairly safety first from a Sunderland perspective early on as well. So I can see a cagey start of the game and then over time it opening up.
Well, I mean, just on that, Martin, can you see Coventry trying to do something similar at the Stadium of Light to what we did to them?
I really don't know. And I don't know how we're going to approach it because we just don't have to, just don't lose. If we don't lose, we go through. So I know it's easier said than done, but I'm kind of thinking that we'll try to invite them on and almost kind of replicate what we did down there, but just not. Obviously, we'll get more space and more time to get out. So I'm kind of thinking, like I said before, like that Burnley game and Borough game at home earlier in the season, where we just go, look, we're set up, you come at us. And I think that's what we'll probably see now. How the crackers, the atmosphere is going to be electric, how that impacts what the players want to do and how we kind of go about it. It's obviously a factor because we'll be wanting to get a goal. Like, everybody will be hoping that we can just turn up, get a goal or two in the first half, and that's it. But it just won't happen like that, will it? It's not going to. You just don't think it's going to be that sort of game. So I actually think we'll probably try to invite them on to us a bit, knowing that they have to come and score at some point and try to take advantage on the counter again.
Yeah, but I mean, just on what Martin's just said, Scott, in terms of us, let's say we do sit in a little bit and you talk about that cagey type of game. I mean, it looks like a full house. There's been, obviously, ourselves and Love Supreme and This Is Wearside, we've put out, information about, welcoming the team in and creating that atmosphere early doors and, taking that into the game. Because it's difficult for players, I think, when the atmosphere is like that, to not almost get swept up in it.
Yeah.
And then if you've got a game plan, you've got to be mentally spot on to not get carried away with the atmosphere and stick to what you're told to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that'll be interesting, won't it? I know exactly what you mean. I mean, I think what Martin's saying is largely right. I guess I don't think they'll be as deep. I don't think they'll sit as deep as they were at Coventry, for one thing. So that immediately should make it a bit easier for them to get out when they actually do have the ball. And I think we'll go back to, again, what Martin was talking about in the early stages at Coventry. I think the Briss's message about what you will want them to do differently is that when they actually have the ball, I think he'll want them to keep possession and build play much better than they did in the first half in particular. So while I think there will be a very, well-organised, kind of obvious defensive structure that Lebris wants his team in when they do not have the ball, I think the difference will be how Sunderland look when they do have the ball, because A, I think he'll want them much higher up the pitch more quickly, and B, I think he'll want them to keep the ball much better and actually build play and build their own attacks, rather than, certainly in the first half hour at the CBS Arena, it was pretty much just all about shutting up shop and digging in. And yes, ideally we'd like to keep the ball, but actually let's just make sure our shape's spot on. I think on Tuesday night there'll be more of a impetus on what we're actually going to do when we get it.
Mm-hmm.
And we might see, which Lebris does sometimes, doesn't he, a pretty obvious different formation when they've got the ball as opposed to when they haven't got the ball, and a kind of, almost a 4-4-2 can become more of a, or a 4-5-1 becomes more of a 4-3-3, doesn't it? I think we might see that when Sunderland don't have the ball, they'll drop into their lines and they'll get men behind it. But when they do have the ball, they'll be more adventurous throwing men forward than they maybe were at Coventry.
I mean, Martin, they haven't won away for 5 games. The run stretches back to the 1st of March. But just like our run at the end of the season, losing 5 off the bounce, I mean, does all that just go out of the window in a game like this? Or do you think, their reaction after the first leg spoke volumes, that they thought, as Scott said, that was our chance because we haven't been great away from home?
Oh, look, I think they definitely thought that was their biggest chance to sort of take a good advantage, didn't they? I'm not necessarily sure that their away form counts for a great deal, to be perfectly honest. They going into this game, it's half time, isn't it? They're a goal down. The dynamics of the game are completely changed. It's kind of all or nothing, really, isn't it? So it's really a one-off game. And I don't really think that their away form counts for that much, to be perfectly honest, because their approach will be different. I think it's really down to what we do as well, like how we. And I think it's going to be such an intriguing game in terms of how we set up and how we go about things. And I think that'll largely dictate how the game goes, to be honest.
Yeah, well, actually, Martin, just quickly before we go on to start 11 with Scott, in terms of the approach, Scott was saying, we're talking about a cagey game. Do you think, in the atmosphere, because I spoke to Scott about the atmosphere, but do you think we slow the game down and control it, or use the atmosphere to get that all-important first goal?
I think it would be lovely, wouldn't it, to go out all guns blazing and try to get that first goal, but Coventry tried to do that to us. And I just think all throughout the course of the season, Regis Lebris has not paid any attention to anything else apart from what his game plan is and what he wants to do and how he wants to set the side up. And I think he will have had mapped out how he's going to approach that first leg and different things within that if certain things happen. And he will already have known the 2 or 3, 4 different ways he might approach the second leg based on what happened in the first leg. So I think he'll already know that. And I don't think that will be swayed really in any way, shape or form by what happened or what happens in the run-up to, or what happens tomorrow night at the stadium. I think he will know really how the team's going to sort of pan out already. But Scott, I think like in terms of team selection, it's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because Ballard was obviously the big call on Friday night, which, I think a few of us kind of thought he might include him to some extent. No, I don't think anybody thought Mepham would drop out in favour of him. And Mayenda and Wilson Isidore both starting. What do you reckon he does?
I think when it comes to the back four, I think that will be unchanged. I think as long as Ballard's fit and he's come through everything all right and he's trained over the weekend, I think Ballard will start, because I think that Lebris, we've seen enough on a couple of times this season to know that I think if Lebris has a gun put to his head, he will say Ballard's the number one centre half. I think Ballard plays, and I do not see him dropping 09. So I think the back four stays the same. The other end of the pitch is much more interesting. There will be an inevitable temptation, I would have thought, to just go with the same again. The tactics worked. There's no reason why that 4-4-2 formation with Mayenda and Isidore can't be as effective, even if Sunderland have more of the ball and are building play more. I just wonder, though, was that a specific formation and a specific lineup for a very specific away game? And will we go back to the more usual 4-3-3 for home game, which would mean Rigg coming in? So you'd have your kind of normal three, if you like, of Dan Neil, Joe Bellingham and Chris Rigg. Don't see how Lafay doesn't play. What he could do, I suppose, is not play Roberts. We've seen that on various occasions, but I think he'd like that outlet. So I suspect if we do see a switch to 4-3-3 with Rigg coming in, it's probably either or for Mayenda or Isidore up top. Now, whoever is left out there will rightly feel very, very aggrieved, but I think Rigg probably comes back in, and I think we probably see a return to 4-3-3. But that is, I would stress that is not with any kind of background knowledge on this at the minute. That is just pure gut feel from me. What do you reckon?
Well, it's going to be an interesting one, because I think, as you say, the temptation is going to be to go, well, that worked, let's do the same again. But I do have a suspicion that it's kind of almost been planned out in advance. And I think even before Friday, he knew what team's going to play on Tuesday, barring injuries and suspensions and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be quite an interesting one to do. I think, that you've got the issue with Roberts has rarely played 2 games in a week. So whether Rigg comes in for him on the right-hand side, potentially even for 60 minutes, and then you switch that up, because you've got to consider the prospect of extra time as well. And, I think that potentially plays into the argument to have one of Mayenda or Isidore on the bench. If you're looking to a 120-minute game, you probably want the option off the bench. We might have Romain Wildcard to chuck into the mix as well, and I don't think he...
that's the other kind of wild card, but you haven't touched on there, and it'd be interesting to see just how fit he is. I mean, I can't see him starting. Mundle, given how little he's played and how well everybody else has been doing. I think he'll be on the bench, like you say, as a if for whatever reason things are going badly wrong, or if we end up in an extra time scenario, Mundle's the type of player who could do some damage against some tiring legs, you would have thought. So I think Mundle, if there's any chance of getting him in the squad, even if he's only really fit into 420 minutes, I think he'll be there for that role.
I think even if he's, because he was on the training pictures over the weekend, so I think they're obviously kind of pushing the message that or hanging that little carrot that he might be
there or
involved to some extent. But even to have him on the bench to chuck on for the last 10 minutes if we need a goal, or a last 15 minutes if it goes to extra time, that could be a great sort of option to have off the bench, couldn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And like I say, because actually, the one thing you would have said about Sunderland's squad on Friday night is if you are starting with Mayenda and Isidore, then your attacking options off the bench are very, very limited. And I thought that on Friday night before kickoff, actually. And clearly, the deciding second leg at home is more of a scenario where in an ideal world, you'd want a couple of potential game changers on that bench. Well, Mundle coming back ticks one of those boxes for that, doesn't he?
It was Chris. What do you reckon for team selection wise?
Well, I feel inferior next to the starting 11 report guru who calls it every week.
I probably got it right about 5 times in 46 games.
Well, let's say you came up with that defensive change before the first leg, which I hadn't thought of. But yeah, I don't think he'll play with the two of them. I actually think he'll start with Isidor. Even though Mayenda is kind of flying, but I just think that he'll want to keep hold of the football. This time, almost the opposite to what we did down there, and I think we'll keep it compact in the middle. So I don't think he'll play the two, because he actually admitted to giving up ground in the middle of the park after the game, and I don't think we'll do that at home, because that's basically, again, that's conceding to Coventry City and allowing them to pack the midfield and have the ball. So I think he'll potentially, I mean, Mayenda could be in there, but Mayenda will be on the left. I mean, it could be the same starting 11 potentially, but Mayenda would be wide left and Lefebvre would be more central, and Lefebvre would be, just ahead of Job and Neil, who will just sit in front of that back four. So if I had to guess what he's going to do, I think the same players, but a slightly different system to get Coventry thinking, because Coventry might see the same starting 11 and go, oh, right, okay, 4-4-2, we know what we're up against. Let's get the ball in the midfield. And then actually when we set up, it's actually Lefebvre in there, and we've got Job, Neil and Lefebvre actually keeping hold of the ball and playing in between the gaps and pushing on. So, and Mayenda as well, because, I think there will be periods, because, Coventry have to score. So there will be periods where we're under pressure and Coventry kind of pin us in for, best part of 5 minutes, maybe at a time. And we have to ride those moments out, because in occasions like this, and it's funny because, you look at the Oxford games and the QPR games, and a ball into the box in those games is completely different to a cross in this game, just because the nerves and that everything has different meaning. A ball over the top, might look kind of meaningless sometimes in a nothing game, but in this game, a ball over the top, and you're thinking, oh no, where's this going to lead? And the players have kind of got to be on it in that sense. So, in terms of keeping it tight, we've still got to do that, but we've got to be able to catch them on the break. And I think that the pace of Mayenda is going to be vital. And you're talking about Mundle, and the fact that obviously he wasn't involved down there, and now he's had that delayed and it's been too soon. You wonder now whether actually Lebree's thinking one more step ahead, and then thinking, well, do I just keep him back for Wembley and have that pace to? I mean, or does he kind of roll the dice and think, well, I have to get there first? But he might be tempted.
I think the thing is, if you put him on the bench and you're winning 3-0, he stays on the bench, doesn't he? I think he's on the bench and you're using him if you need him. In an ideal scenario, Mundle sits on the bench all night, because it means Sunderland have already done the job and you just don't have to risk anything. But I think you want him there in case it's not quite going the way you want it to do, and he's an option.
Yeah. And Mayenda, if he's on the left, Mayenda gives you a similar type of player out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, we've covered the starting 11, so I suppose it's time to get into prediction time. And I see Martin already smirking. He knew what was coming. We'll come with you first, Scott. I don't know how you think it's all going to pan out.
I think, like I say, I think it's going to be. I think the first half will be cagey. I don't think either team will be risking anything. It was interesting when you're talking about managers. There are certain managers, and Sunderland have had some of them, who will be going into this game saying, I want my players to absolutely feed off the emotion of the crowd. I want them to go hell for leather in the first 15 minutes. That is absolutely not Regis Lebris. He will be telling the players, no matter how white hot the atmosphere is, I want you to keep your heads and I want you to do the job I've told you to do. And I suspect that'll be all around initially, shape, organisation, everything that he'll want, the basics of the game. So I think it's 0-0 at half time. I think it's 0-0 after an hour. I think that then means Coventry do have to start taking risks. They do have to start pushing that more. Surely in that scenario, there's gaps at the back. And whether he started or not, Mayenda scores on about 72 minutes and Sunderland win 1-0.
Yeah. Martin, I don't know, what's your feeling on it?
Oh, look, I think look, I think Coventry are a really good side and dangerous side. I think they've got lots of talented players and they've got lots of goals in them. I was reading something by Coventry Journal, kind of looking at what their team might be, and they kind of are proposing that Sims is the only change coming in for Thomas Asante. So we could see Ella Sims come in as centre forward. That means they're probably going to go a little more direct than they were, but that's obviously a bigger threat in the box for crosses and corners and all that sort of stuff. So I think we're going to have to be really, really at it. And look, Friday was great to get the win down there, come away with a lead. There's still so much hard work left to see this through. As I say, I think they're a good side. I think they've got goals in them, and I think we'll set up to nullify them and catch them on the break. So I think Scott's kind of spot on in terms of going, outlining how the game is likely to go. And look, if we win 1-0 with a 72nd minute goal from Anthony Patterson, then we'll be bloody happy, won't we? So I think we'll get through. I think it'll be really tight. I think it'll be nervy. I think there'll be a couple of twists and turns in there that we probably haven't foreseen. But I certainly don't think it'll be a straightforward, easy night at all. And I think we have to give them the due credit and respect that they deserve, and take them as serious as we took them on Friday.
Yep, well, that's it. I mean, I don't think there's many goals usually when it comes to Sunderland at the Stadium of Light. We haven't beaten a side by more than the one goal for a while, and I think we've only done it a few times this season. So I'm going for a nervy 0-0 or a nervy 1-1. But we'll see how it plays out. In terms of Wembley, Scott, I mean, are you already kind of booked up? Or are you one step away from pressing the button to book, or what?
No, yeah, don't want to jinx it, but we, myself and Donna I work with, we do have a couple of hotel rooms that are booked up. We did that. To be fair, we did that with about 2 or 3 weeks of the season left, thinking, well, hopefully it'll be Sunderland. It might be Borough. It might be both of them against each other. Well, one's fallen by the wayside, but one's still there. So, we'd be driving down the Friday night, bit of Trafalgar Square, all of that, all the fun, and then the game on the Saturday and back up. So yeah, we're just about. What about you boys?
Well, go on then, Martin. I'll let you go first on that.
Yeah, well, I'm not at the moment, but hey, who knows what happens on? Who knows what happens?
I was going to say, I do have to say they are refundable hotel rooms. We're not that stupid.
Yeah, but Martin's told the story a few times that he came over because Martin's based in Australia. He came over for the League One playoffs and had COVID.
Got COVID on the train, couldn't go to the game. So there you go. So I'm not risking. I'm not risking that again. I'm loath to risk that again.
But seeing if he's going enough brownie points.
Never say never.
Never say never. Exactly.
That's basically him saying he's coming. Yeah, I mean, I've already booked it in with the other half and all that sort of stuff. So it's just kind of keeping fingers crossed.
It is if everything goes well on Tuesday, it'll come around quick, won't it? I mean, it's only a week and a half, so it's not like you're in a cup semi-final or whatever where you get through to Wembley, but it's 2 months away. It's like bang, bang, bang. So yeah.
Well, that's it. And knowing the playoffs, we've analysed it and we've gone through everything. And then red card in the first 5 minutes and everything.
No, exactly.
Doesn't it? All of this is pointless, isn't it?
Well, we haven't even talked about penalties yet, have we?
Oh, let's not.
Let's end this now.
Until you said that, it genuinely hadn't entered my head. I think Nick Barnes might have mentioned it last week, but then he said we've got no chance because basically we couldn't score a goal for so long, and we didn't look like we could score one. So God help us if it goes to that.
Let's not go there.
No, but you've got the nerves jangled now. Cheers for that, Scott.
Jeff Whitley's not playing anymore, is he? That's one thing.
Yeah, that's a start.
No, we've been here, but that's it for the fifth time in the last 7 years. We go into a second leg of a playoff semi-final, and we're biting our nails as usual, and we're all wondering. But I think that's a good note to leave it. So thank you again, Martin. Always a pleasure, mate.
Cheers, mate.
And that's it. I'm sure we'll speak soon after the game.
Indeed.
And thank you, Scott. Always a pleasure.
No, anytime. And hopefully enjoy Tuesday night.
Yeah, and that's it. And if we do get there, we'll maybe arrange to catch up, and we'll have our phones set to record in Trafalgar Square. It might not make any sense, but we can try. Yeah?
That'll be good. Yeah, that'll be good.
Good stuff. And thanks again, everyone, for listening. I hope your nerves are holding out better than ours. There's loads to listen back to on How We're the Podcast if you want to bask in more of that first leg or build up to the second, as we've been talking about today. But of course, we'll be back with all the reaction along with all our usual features after the game. But from us, it's bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.